Hi, everyone. Hope you are enjoying this morning. I have the great honor to be the last speaker of this morning and also have this difficult position when I'm the only things remaining between you and the lunch. So I will try to make this as enjoyable as possible and also, I hope, quick so we can all go to eat. So we will talk about performance optimization, but first a bit of context. I'm working at Weweb, so you probably don't know us. We are a small, full remote company. It's us here on Gather, for people who know. This is where we are going to meetings. And you don't know us because we are much well known on the no-code community, because this is what we are building, a no-code web app builders. So here you have our project, which is done in Vue. So you have all the editor, and in the middle you have an iframe with a preview of your web application. I think I can do an entire talk about working with iframe, but this will be for another day. Yeah, I heard you laughing. It's because you have worked with them before. Yes. As you see, it's a complex interface. It's looking like a Figma feelings. You are drag and dropping a lot of stuff, and everything on the iframe is interactive. You can select it, change it. Each text, image, everything is a component, even each containers. And when you select it, you have hundreds of properties you can change. So here on the page, I have thousands and thousands of Vue.js components. And as you know, it may not go well in terms of performance. So this is why we have to work on it, and I would like to share with you what we have done for that. But first, a disclaimer. We will not talk about performance when the app loads. Here we are here to speak about performances when the application is running, make it smooth, interactive. Also, most of the tricks I will give you can work for a lot of different use cases, but keep in mind that adding them, it's a trade-off. It always came with a cost. This cost can be just readability of your code or maintainability, and sometimes it's not worth it. Like for us, thousands and thousands of components, a few different, it's very significant, it's exponential. But if you have only 10 times your component on the page, don't go with some of them because you will probably not get what you want from it. So first, what are the different tools we can use to track performances and help us to find what are the different bottlenecks on our app? The first thing to do is to configure your app, your Vue.js app, and turn off performances tracking. It will help all the tools to have more data. It's working only in dev mode, but that's exactly what we want. The other tools, really important, it's the browser tools and the performance tab. We are tracking performance, we are going to the performance tab. That's fine. And it's really, really useful. And keep in mind that it's sometimes useful to try the performance tab on different browsers, because some of them have more features than the others. Especially lately, I think Edge have a lot of great stuff who can be very useful. And another thing, I think you are all already running a Vue.js dev tool. It also has performance tracking. And if you see these yellow boxes, or even red one, if you are really in trouble, it's a good first track to start looking. When you know more when to look, then you need to understand what's going on. And you have special lifecycle hooks in Vue.js which can help you for that. So on the top, don't know, yeah, top right for you, you have what's available in the component. So you have render tracked and render triggered. It's event, you can put debugger here or just a console.log. and it will let you help understand what are different dependencies of the component, and if the component is re-rendering, why. And you have the equivalent for watch and for computed. So we are going to do some demonstration today. There is an online website. You can go by the URL or the query code. I don't know if this is big enough, so I'm hoping. All the code of the demonstration are available on GitHub. And it will be available after the conference. On the website, you will also find links to contact me after if you want. It's really complicated to point to complex app problems in simple example. So most of this example will use a visual trick. This will be like a square with some colors, random colors, and each time the component re-render, the color of the square will change. So if all the squares are changing color, it's probably something is going wrong. Be careful. People enjoy playing with that. You click, you see things changing. You can become a bit addictive to it. I've seen that with my colleague before. So, first things. When you start debugging a Vue.js application, you often think that it's the fault of Vue. So you think that the framework is doing something dumb. No, you are probably using a smart framework, and you make him doing something dumb. But also, it's not always on the Vue.js part, because Vue.js is a powerful tool, and it gives you great power. And sometimes its only fault is to generate a DOM with lot of elements, maybe too easily, and so you don't realize how much things are going on the browser. And then you open the Performance tab, and this is what you see. I don't know if you have already seen this kind of stuff, but on the Performance tool, you have colors depending on what is keeping the browser busy. And when it's yellow, it's from a script, so the JavaScript part. And when it's this purple, like that, it's when the browser is rendering your page. So when you see that, it's mostly because you have a problem in the very basic of a web application. It's HTML or CSS or something you are doing wrong, and it's keeping the browser busy. First, demo. So you can just navigate through the app going to the demo, or you can just go directly with this link. Be careful. Some of these examples are here to point to problem and laggy stuff, so it may take some time to load, because this is exactly the point of this app. So first example, it's something you see a lot when you have a complex application with a complex UX. You have some menu you need to position, and you have to position them absolutely. They are teleported somewhere else, and so you need to access the width to make it appear in the correct position. And you often have something like this. Calculate the menu position when my element is selected, get the size of it, and I will use it to position my menu. If you do that and you open your Performance tab, this is what will happen. You will see this big purple stuff invading your Performance tab. Why? Because get bounding client rect. I think you all know it's not really good for performance. Why it's not good? It's because it needs the layout to be computed by the browser. If at any time between the last time you ask and the next time you ask, something happened on the page, you have to redo all the computation. And here, just after, we are updating the style of one of the elements. So we are invalidating the cache it's using. So we have a loop here, and each time we ask the browser to recompute the entire page. The more elements you will have here, the more time it will take, and sometimes it can be like 3 or 4 seconds of lag going, and then you will scroll and nothing will be smooth. Easy way to fix it is to not use this method, because we know it's not well in performance, and we will just care about the size of our element. So we can go with a resize observer. And with the resize observer, I think maybe not everybody knows it, but yeah, now we can use them safely. They are supported everywhere. You will be able to have an observer on the size, and you will have your own cached version of what is the width and the height. And each time it changes, you will be notified, but you will not be notified each time you ask. And this is really helpful. So we create the observer, we observe our element, and we don't forget to disconnect the watcher when we don't need it. Really useful. You can have a lot of other problems. I've seen page with like seconds of lag just because of CSS selectors. Yes, this can happen. By the way, Edge has a very cool tools to find this one. It can be CSS rules. I've seen lags for 100% just because of that. And even each time you are interacting with a scroll position and stuff like that. As I said, we often have to track reactivity. So, quick story. In Weweb, we have a notion of collection. A collection is a data source coming from any backend data source. And we have them on our store. And because all users can use them in some formula everywhere in the app, we make them available through an object which is nicely shaped. So you see we have a computer like that. It's doing something very simple. We are just looping through all our data sources, and we are exposing them by ID and by name. And one day, the product team came and said, oh, there is too much data here. Can you be sure there is like less properties because the users, they don't understand all of them? And we say, sure, we will just do that. We update the computed, and we just take a few properties here. And we say, oh, it will be better for performances. We have less things in our object. We were so wrong. Because basically, if you run the demo, you will see that it's much more laggy when you are going with a second version. And you are wondering why, what is happening. It's because when you use the untracked stuff, you will see that in the first code, the only dependencies our computed as is the keys of the collection objects. So if one collection changes, all the other ones don't care. But on the second one, you are depending on all properties of each collection. And here you think it's easy to spot this. But we are in an application with thousands and thousands of lines of code. And I'm just putting it to you with the problematic lines. Using the untrack was really, really helpful for us. Another thing is how computed works. This is something you often have in your application. Is this famous, is selected, is my ID equal to the selected ID? But the problem is how computed works. They will register dependencies. So here, my computed is dependent to the selected ID. If I'm updating it, I think there is only the one selected which will be updated, but everybody will be updated because the dependencies have changed, so the computed will be work as dirty, and even if the value inside the return value is the same, it's true or false, then it will mark all the components as need to be re-rendered. There is a few solutions to not have this problem anymore. The first solution is to use a child component, because Vue is smart, and if a property of a component has changed but has the same value, it will not re-render the component. But it's often not easy, because maybe you are using this on different part of your application. And also, creating a component also came with a cost. So you can't do that every time. And in our use case, our main component was having 1,000 times on the page, and adding one child component here was really hurting the performance. The other two tools you have is Vmemo and what I call lazy ref, which is just a pattern we like to use. So Vmemo, it's really easy. It's a directive directly from Vue.js. and you just have your v4, and you add this directive, an array of dependencies, and if this dependencies does not change in terms of value, it will not re-render this part of the DOM. So this is useful, but on our side, we were not able to use this that much because it's really depending on v4. And if you have more than one dependencies, it can go very tricky. But I advise you to keep it in mind because for some simple use case, it's very, very powerful. Then we have what we call the lazy ref. I don't know if this is a good word, but this is how we are calling it. It's just a pattern, a way to build a composable which will not be dirty each time the dependencies change, but only when the value change. So it's basically just creating a reference, having a watcher, and updating the reference only if the value change. It's a bit of, like, as I said, it always comes with a cost, but on our use case, it was really impactful. And it can only work with very simple use case because you don't want to go with comparing value of an array or an object because this can take a lot of times. Then another tools I want to speak about is the effect scope. So does anybody know what is effect scope? It's something new, but not pretty new. I think it's come with Vue 3.2. It's a tool a lot of framework builders are using because it's much more when you are going deep dive into how reactivity works for Vue.js. But first, what is an effect? An effect is something reacting to something else. So in Vue.js, it's basically watcher and computed. And what is an effect scope? It's just a bag which will gather all the different effects you are creating. Then remember which one were there. And when you want to release, you just call stop on the effect scope, and everything is released. The watcher has stopped, the computed stop watching, and you release memory of it. It's used internally on all Vue.js components. So every time you write something in the setup function, it's run under an effect scope. So it gathers everything. So when your component is removed or unmounted, everything is released, and you don't have a memory leak of that. But it's also a very, very powerful tool to do some reactivity tricking. First is being able to create what we called a shared effect. So let's say you have a composable which is creating a reference. This reference is very easy to compute. On our use case, it was our component depending on hundreds of properties who need to be responsive, stateful, and so on. And we don't want to do all the computation several times if the component is repeat on the page. This is how it works. So this is a composable factory. It takes a composable and it returns another one. How it's working? First, we need to keep track of how many things depend on the reference we are creating, because we want to release it when there is no more, but we don't want to release it too soon. So we keep track of the number of subscribers. Then, if nobody else has already creating the value, we create a scope and we create our reference under this scope. So every logic you have in your composable will be gathered here, and you will create one, and a nice way to release it when you don't need it anymore. So you can go as crazy as you want in this create ref composable, create watchers, computed as much as you want. Everything will be gathered by the effect scope. And there is something really important here, is the parameter we pass to the constructor of the effect scope is true. It means that this scope is detached. Because normally, when you create an effect scope inside another, when the parent is released, he released all his children. But in our case, this will be called in a component. So your first component mount, it creates everything. Then later it's unmount, but you have all the components in the meantime which are using this reference. If you don't put the detach mode, then when the first component unmount, everything will be killed, the reactivity will be killed, and all your other components will not be updated. So it's really important in this use case to say, I want to control myself when I'm releasing these different effects. And then we register a dispose function. The onscope dispose is the equivalent of the unmount hook you can have on setup function, but it's more global because you are not in a component every time. And this dispose function, it's easy. You just remove one subscriber, and if there is no more subscriber, you release the resources. This kind of pattern is so useful that I think that VueJs expose a method to do that easily, like this kind of line of code. They wrap it for you because it's really interesting. Another really cool things you can do is this kind of effect, scope effect, is what I call an activable effect. So let's say you have something which is taking a lot of time to compute, like calculating a distance, or who needs a lot of watcher on your window. But you are not needed the value updating every time. Like, you need it only when the element is selected, you care about the value, but all the other time you really don't care. So you don't want all this watcher and all this computation to run every time. So you will create this kind of composable, which will take your activation condition. It will create a reference. So here I have a distance, like, I don't know, something you may want to have. And then I will watch the activation condition. And if the activation condition is going to false, I will just release everything. And on the other side, if it's going to be active, I will be creating all my logic, wrapping it in the effect scope. And so I will be able to release them quickly. And yeah, that's all. I'm almost done. I'm almost in time. That's perfect. We can go all to eat. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you enjoy touching the little square. Maybe it was a bit fast to play with something which is taking time to load. But it's staying here. So if you want to talk about it, I will be there for the 2 days of the conference. And I will be really happy to talk with somebody about this kind of issue. And also, if you have good example of how to use these different tricks on your application, I will be very happy to hear about it. You can contact me on Twitter, on the Discord, or you have all the links on the website, or even you can use GitHub or whatever. Thanks, everyone.